So we are up to the bottom of Daf Chaf Hey Omid Beis. We were speaking about the Chassan and the Chassan party and the Sheva Brachas if they have to sit in the sukkah. And we ended off by saying that the Zayda said that I can eat in the sukkah and then I can go party in the chuppah. And I not only am I not disturbed by it, to the contrary, I take extra joy out of it because I'm able to be Mekayim the mitzvah of sukkah and be Mesamech with my kala. Before we start, I just want to thank once again ID Tech, which is a tech company, a computer company in Lakewood, that they always generously let me use their boardroom whenever I need to say a shir and broadcast it from here. So I want to thank them very much. Okay, Tanu Rabbanon. We're all the way at the bottom of Daf Chaf Hey Omid Beis. Chasen v'sheshpilen v'chol b'nei chuppah. The whole wedding party is peturin minat tefila u'minat tefillin v'chayovim b'krishma. They're part of them tefillin, but they're chayiv on krishma. Rashi says, tur minat tefila the boy kavana u'minat tefillin mishum the shchicha six shechros v'kalash rois. When you're partying, it's not appropriate to wear tefillin, but they're chayiv in krishma. The mitzvah's kavanasa ina lepasuk rishon. You only have to have deep kavana for the first pasuk. For the first pasuk, even though you're part of the chasen party, you shouldn't have a problem. The chaylin liyashiv daiton shaktana the liquor pasuk rishon. 1 minute they should be able to handle. Mishum Rab Shila Amru chasen potter. A chasen is potter from krishma. Rashi says because he's third, but the shushbilin v'chol b'nei chuppah are chayavin. They're chayiv. Rashi speaks out something very important. Clearly, Rab Shila and the Tanakam of Rab Shila, the last ladin tanoi ha'oishik b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah. They don't hold of ha'oishik b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah, like we learned earlier that a chassan doesn't have to say Kriya Shema. In fact, they hold you don't have this p'tur. Zok tehele gemara. Tanya Amar Rab Chananya ben Akavi. Koisvei svarim. People who write svarim, they're soifrim. Tefillin the mezuzos. So they're providing what we would call an essential service that needs to be available, I guess, at all times. Hein, the umnin, the soifim themselves, the tigrayim and the wholesalers, the tigrayim and maybe the retailers, anybody else who works in this trade that supplies kisvei kodesh, the Klal Yisrael, even those people who sell tchelas, so they provide the necessary parts of your tzitzis. Petur nikrishma u'minat tefila u'minat tefillin u'mikol mitzvahs hamurs petur. L'kaim divrei Rabbi Yosy Glili. This is consistent with what we learned from Rabbi Yosy Glili. Shoy Rabbi Yosy Glili Aimer ha'oshik b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah. So this doesn't mean that you never have to do the mitzvahs. It means when it's going to conflict or impact your doing of the mitzvah. And there's actually a machlokes rishonim as to what level it has to impact it. Is it dafka when you're actually in the middle of doing a sale or writing tefillin, or is it also if it's going to impede, if it's just going to impede your ability to do these mitzvahs? Tanur Rabbanan, halchi drachim b'yoyim. If you're traveling by day, you're potter from the sukkah by day. Now this wouldn't even have anything to do with the oishik b'mitzvah, potter min mitzvah. Rashi says, Tosfos says, calls an after miteshu came to duru. When you live in your home, you do travel if you need to go somewhere, and therefore you're potter from sukkah. However, the chayavim balayla at night, when you come home, avadi yimuchayv in sukkah. So Rashi, kisha adam lon balayla b'yishuv. When you get home, of course, he has to sleep in the sukkah. Hachidrachim balayla. What if someone travels at night? So then p'turim min sukkah balayla, he's potter by night, but the chayavim b'yoyim. What about hachidrachim b'yoyim uvalayla? What if you're traveling 24 hours? Then p'turim min sukkah bein b'yoyim uvein balayla. But here's where it gets exciting. Hochin ledvar mitzvah. But if you're traveling for a mitzvah, and we learned in the Mishnah examples are if you're going to visit your Rebbe, you're going to learn Torah, going for Pidyon Shvuyim, then Peturin Bein Beyoim Ubein Balayla. Then you trigger the additional Petur of a Isaac B'mitzvah Patam in a mitzvah. So even though you're resting, you're traveling by day, you're resting by night, if running around to look for a sukkah will impede your ability to do the mitzvah, even if it's not a direct contradiction to you doing the mitzvah, you're still going to be put. Yod Rab Chisda, Rabbi Barhuna, Aile B'Shabta de Rigla of Reish Galusa, when they would come for the Shabbos Chalamoid to come to the Reish Galusa's house, Havaganu Ariksa de Surah, they would sleep under the stars on the banks of the river Surah. Why? Amr, they said, Anan Shluchim Mitzvah, Anan Upturn. We're Shluchim Mitzvah. We're going to learn by our Rebbe. Now, if we have to find a sukkah, we're going to be late. It's going to cause us issues, and it's going to impede our ability to be Mekayim the mitzvah, and therefore we're part of the mitzvah sukkah. So this opens up a huge machloikas halacha l'mais. The question is, if you're traveling on a day trip, right? So normally during the day we don't sleep, we're part of a meeting in the sukkah, but at night you come home, you have to eat in the sukkah. So are you allowed to go for a person to travel for business? So he needs to travel, he has no choice. So if he's traveling and there's no sukkah there, it's also Teshuv Shei Kadurush, he wouldn't have to have a sukkah. But what if someone wants to go on a trip? What if you want to do, on Sukkot, you want to do an overnight trip to Algonquin Park? You want to take your kids to Algonquin Park. Are you allowed to do that? Because you're not going to have a sukkah. And there's a very big shaila about it. Rav Moshe holds you're absolutely not allowed to do that. If you're traveling for business or for something that's important, sure, you're allowed to do that. It's Teshu Shen Kedur. But to travel just for fun, for pleasure, you're not allowed to do that. And Rav Moshe says of something very serious about it. He's medame it to someone who looks to modify his begadim, so he shouldn't be mechuyev in tzitzis. And the Gemara Menacha says that someone who does that, although he's not over nisser, but b'shas rigzav, when there's a charoy naf, your Rebbeinu Shalom is parei from such people. So that's what Rav Moshe says about somebody who travels for leisure, have fun. He goes on an overnight chalamoy trip and he doesn't concern himself with the sukkah. Rabbi Yashiv, on the other hand, holds no, that's not a problem. It's Teshuv Shein Kedur, you're allowed to go. So Rabbi Moshe is mekel. He says if you're at home and you do a trip that you could do any other time, he's very machmir there, and he says you can't go on an overnight trip if it's going to cause that you should be mevatel the mitzvah sukkah. However, Dr. Moshe, let's say you went to Africa for Pesach, you had a once in a lifetime trip to Africa, and they're going on a safari that's overnight. There, avad, you're allowed to go. So it's only if it's very easy for you and you're not missing out anything. You can go on this Algonquin trip any day in the summer. It doesn't have to be b'dafka chalamoid Pesach. That's when Reb Moshe holds it's a big problem. But if it's like a once in a lifetime situation, you're in a place where you won't be again. Even Reb Moshe is mekel that you'd be allowed to go, even though you're going to be without the mitzvah sukkah. Maybe it's just my perception, but I always thought that Reb Moshe would be more mekel than the Israeli person, the Rabbi Yosha, but here you see Moshe is much more machmer. But then I understand on Pesach in Israel, everyone's running all over the country, so they have to make sure that the people have the ability to do that. Okay, Tanur Rabban, Shomer Yair, people who are
yes. Shlomi asked about what about day trips, right?
So day trips are for sure not a problem, because it's like every day people go out of their house. It's getting to do as long as at night they're sukkah. So if you do the day trip, you go to Canada's Wonderland. I'm not sure if you have to. While you travel, once you're at your destination,
right? While you're traveling,
if you're at a destination, then you probably have a chiyuv to build a sukkah. But while you're traveling, you wouldn't have to. If you drive 2-3 hours, you want to go to Kingston or something, or you want to go to the Tosha Rebbe, you want to drive to Montreal. On the way, you're allowed to eat. En route, you can eat at an en route. That's why it's called en route. A Yid made it, Kirana. A Yid was the one who built the en routes. He called it en route. So even when you're parked there, I don't need a sukkah, I'm en route. So it gives it a chaloy shem en route. So mainly you're part of the sukkah there. You know the fellow who owns the Maple Leafs, a guy Larry Silverstein, I think, or Larry Tenenbaum? Larry Tenenbaum. So his son, Ken, built all the en routes. He got the contract from the Canadian government to build all the en routes. Tanur Rabbanim. Shomer Yair. the guardsmen of the city, biyoim, if they're on call, or not on call, if they're on duty by day, petur min hasukkah biyoim. But v'chayavim b'layla. Shomer b'layla. What if you have a night shift? Then petur min hasukkah b'layla v'chayavim b'yoim. Shomer here, bein biyoim, bein b'layla. If they have a 24-hour shift, then petur min hasukkah bein biyoim, bein b'layla. Then they're put from the sukkah 24 hours, a whole night. What about people who watch gardens so that I guess the parish shouldn't be looted? In fact, if they're there all the time, what's the big deal? Let them build a sukkah there. Let them build a sukkah and let them sit in the sukkah. They're pretty much permanently there, so let them build themselves a little shelter. Zokta Gemara. Abaya Omar Teshu came to Duru. And Rashi explains Teshu came to Duru. Kederach Shudar Kol Hashana Bebeisai. You live in a sukkah the way you would live in your home, which means his kikasi Torah laniach durasai v'lader kan besukkah imitoisav uklitashmisha imatzaisav. The Torah tells you that the same way you live in your house, that's how you should live in your sukkah. But these little huts that were built for the Shemer Paris, no one slept out there bedding there. It wasn't really a permanent type of house. It's not, it's the big tircha to bring there. People don't normally bring it there. So therefore, this type of hut that they normally live in does not require to be put into a sukkah. Doesn't require it to be made into a sukkah. Rava said another reason why the Shemer Paris don't build a sukkah. Because they're watching a big area. They have to move around. They don't just stay in one place. They have to move around. So could you imagine if they made a big post? Now everybody knows where they are. Pirtza Kari Laganav. So Rashi Mashal Hedjidu. If you have a base, so the Ganav knows you're basically in your hut the whole time. Haganav Roya Yoshib Sukka Balayla, and then he has free reign. Nichnas Vigonev Apayers to Lurecha Keres. We Bedavka don't want these Shemer Paris to have structures. They have to be under the stars. This way, nobody ever knows where they are, and people will be afraid to loot these fields because they never know where the guard might show up. My Beinayu, what's the difference between why these Shemer Ginois Upardesim are potter? Ikebenai the Kaminter Kari de Peri. What if he's not watching the entire area? There's one big area where there's a big pile of pears, and that's what he's watching. So there, if it's Al Teshu came to Duru, he's still potter from building a sukkah. But if it's because he has to remain invisible, so he could pop up anywhere, that's not required over here. Here, if he has a big presence in the guard tower, right there where the Kri is, it'll be a good shmir. Those who are ill aleinu and those who take care of them. Tanarabban, it doesn't mean a chayla sheish b'sakana because there you can be machal Shabbos. You for sure don't have to be busy with the mitzvah sukkah. Afilu chayla she'ein b'sakana, even a chayla she'ein b'sakana, afilu chosh be'einav, even if he has an issue with his eye, which Tosfos explains. Afilu chosh be'einav of Tosfos, abel b'she'ein b'sakanas ayin, even though there's no danger they might even lose his eye, because there's a kanas eber, because the kanas nefashis. If there's a danger of him losing a limb, that you're allowed to be machal Shabbos. But Afilu Chalav was a Shabbos. Here it just means he has an issue with his eye. That's enough to consider him a chayla that him and his attendant is part from the sukkah. Afilu Chash B'Roishor is a headache. And they're masber, the reason why the Misham Shem are part from the sukkah. Why are the Misham Shem part from the sukkah? And the Misham Shem is not busy the entire time taking care of the chayla. He's with him, but they don't have to stand by his bed the whole time. So Rabbi Yosef Engel says that Klal Yisrael is a nation of chesed. That's our identity. And our identity is to be there with the chayla. And therefore the Teshu Kein Toduru demands that you should not be in the sukkah, but you should be with the chayla. I once had an issue with my eye. And where was this? It was in Kisri. And Rabbi Yossi Bar Chalafta was the rabbi there. The hitter Rabbi Yossi B'Dibi Lishan Ani U'Mishamshay Chutz L'Sukkah. He allowed me and my shamosim to sleep outside the sukkah. So you see that even for something like that, they were allowed. It's interesting to note that they weren't matter him to eat outside the sukkah, They were only matter him to sleep outside the sukkah. Vice the chois, just to stay there for a little bit to eat, he would have been mechuyev to eat in the sukkah. He was just allowed not to sleep in the sukkah. Zotamar Rav Shorel Rab Acha Bardla. Rav was matter for Rab Acha Bardla lemigna bechilta b'sukkah, to sleep under a canopy in the sukkah. Mishumboki, Rashi says there were these flies or insects that were very annoying, so he had a little enclosure that he slept in, and once again he was allowed. Rav Shorel Rab Acha Bar Ada lemigna bar mi metal alasa. He let him sleep out of the sukkah. Mishum sircha digger gishta, because the earth that they had there smelled. They smeared the earth with some type of coating, and it smelled, and therefore he was allowed to sleep outside the sukkah. So the question here is, once again, how is he? How, first of all, how, if it's a sukkah that smells, we learned according to we learned the Gemara earlier, it's not a kosher sukkah at all. So the Rishonim talk about this. The Rishonim say either it didn't smell bad for everybody that was possible sukkah, the smell happened to have bothered him. That's one shot. The other shot is that it wasn't such a powerful smell. So you can stay there, you can eat there, you can stay there a little bit, but to sleep there overnight, where you're inhaling it the whole time, that's something that became more annoying, which opens up a whole different shaila. That is, there's a famous Mordechai who says that if you have a sukkah that you can't sleep in, for instance, it's in a dangerous place, can't sleep there, then you're not allowed to eat there either. It's not a kosher sukkah, because a sukkah is only a kosher sukkah if you could do everything in it. It's a big chumrah from the Mordechai. So there are those who bring a raya, the Pri Megadim brings a raya from this Gemara that in fact it doesn't possible to sukkah. Why? Because here you had a sukkah that smelled. It smelled bad enough that Rab Acha Bar Ada couldn't sleep in the sukkah, but yet he still ate in the sukkah. So you see, even though it's annoying and uncomfortable enough that you can't sleep there, but you could still eat there, it would still be a kosher sukkah. There are those who bring such a raya. I think the Pri Megadim brings such a raya. Rav Tamei, someone who's uncomfortable is part from sukkah. We learned a mitzvah is not part of the sukkah. Only a chayla is part of the sukkah. If someone's a chayla, then not only is he potter, but his attendants are potter as well. Mitzdayer, if someone's only mitzdayer who potter, but mishamshav loy, he might be potter from the sukkah, but his mishamashim still has to remain in the sukkah. You're allowed to eat achilas arai out of the sukkah. How much bread can you eat and it would still be considered achilas arai? Because Paris you can eat as much as you want. So the shaila is just by pasta, who speaks out. Amar Rabbi Yosef, tarti oitlas bay, 2 or 3 bayim is considered a rai. It's a fair amount of food. 2 or 3 bayim is still considered a rai. Amar le Abaye, so Abaye asked his Rebbe, "Vazimnin sagin sagei leile inish bahachi, v'avel asudus kva." Many times that's all people eat. Many times people eat 2, 3 kibetzim, and that's their entire meal. So how can you suggest that it's considered an achilas arai? Amar Abaye, I'll tell you what's considered arai. Kidetoim bar beirav v'ayalakal, the nash that someone grabs before he runs to yeshiva. And Rashi says kidetoim bar beirav v'ayalakal. But Boiker, the Shahochel Beis Medrash, when he's running out to the Beis Medrash in the morning, and he's afraid that the Rebbe is going to go overtime on Shir, therefore, and he'll be starved. So therefore, he grabs a little bit. He has a little bit of a Danish for the coffee in the morning before he goes out, so he shouldn't starve to death from the Shir, and that they lose a kabeya. So that's what Abai held Shir was. We once had a Rebbe in Philadelphia. He wasn't my Rebbe, but he was hired on after I was past that shir, and it was at 2:00, and the shir was supposed to end. And he tells the Bacham, this is such an important shir that I'm giving, that I want you to promise me that second seder you're not going to learn your normal limud. You're going to sit and chazer the shir the entire second seder. And he said, and I have a migui that I can make you do that, because migui I don't have to dismiss the shir until at the end of second seder. Then you'd be stuck in shir until the end of second seder. So because I'm migui, I want you to learn second seder. I want you to chazer the shir. So Abacha raises his hand and says, Rebbe, that migo wouldn't work. So Rebbe said, Favos nicht. So he said, because migo the azah lo yaminon. You don't say migo when it's a hazah. You wouldn't dare do anything like that. So the Rebbe started laughing. And then he says, Mordechai, I should have thrown you out of this year for such a chutzpah. But it was just such a good line. I couldn't. Zog to Gemara weiter. Tanu Rabban.
Yes, just as a sidebar, I know that we're learning all this Gemara and the questions on Lubavitch behavior continues, how they don't sleep in the sukkah, how they don't have noise sukkah, they're not mitztayer. Just to let you know, they don't even drink water out of the sukkah either. Nothing.
So for they're machmer.
What's that?
So they're machmer.
They're machmer. If that's called chumrah, right? I think it's called chassidischkeit, not chumrah. There's a difference.
No, there's the Poish can say that it's a big bracha if someone's makbid even not to drink water out of the sukkah. I was learning it in Dishwish. Even non-Lubavitchers are makbid on that.
Okay.
Taner Rabbanan. Oichlin achilas aray chutz l'sukkah. You're allowed to eat achilas aray chutz l'sukkah, but the ein yishenim shinas aray chutz l'sukkah. But sleeping is very chomer. You can't even sleep. The shinas aray chutz l'sukkah. My time. What's the reason? Amar Abashi gzer shem yerdin. We're afraid that you'll fall into a deep sleep, and that's a much bigger problem because then it's going to be yeshinas kfa. Amar Abaye elahad Tanya. We learned regarding tefillin. Yoshan adam shinas ari b'tefillin. You're allowed to sleep a shinas ari b'tefillin. Avaloi shinas kva, but not a shinas kva. And we're soon going to see what shinas kva is. But you're not allowed to sleep a shinas kva in your tefillin. And Rashi says the reason why you shema yafiach ben when you're in a deep sleep, things happen. How could you allow him even to sleep a shinas arai? The same svar by sukkah you don't allow it. You shouldn't allow it by tefillin. Like shema yeredim, you might fall into a deep sleep. When are you allowed to sleep a shinas arai in your tefillin? That's if you tell somebody, if you see that I fall asleep deep, wake me up. And therefore it would be allowed. But stamazoi to do a shinas arai wouldn't be allowed because you might fall into a deep sleep. What good does an assistant help? The guy who's watching you is also going to fall asleep, and then you'll be right back where you started from. I remember one year we didn't make it to Tush. There was a big accident on the highway, and we were stuck in between two exits in Montreal for like 4 or 5 hours. So we couldn't make it to Tush. We got to Montreal, we got to Abish's home, from Abish's parents. We got there less than 5 minutes before Shkia. That's how tight it was. So we davened in the downtown Tush Shtibel, which barely has a minyan. And I remember in the middle of Chazor Shots by the Yoitris, everybody's sitting down, and the Baltfila was a little tired, so he sat down too. And everybody falls asleep, and he falls asleep. And eventually the entire Bishmedish was sitting there sleeping, the Arvach Tzar. And then somebody wakes up and says, Nee. And like we lost a half hour because everybody, the entire Bismillah fell asleep. Only in Tosh. Ella, Amar Rabba Barbachana, Amar B'yochanan, B'maniach Roisha Ben Birka Baschina. Speaking where you put your head in between your knees, and I guess somehow that stopped you from falling asleep, and only there could you do a Shinas Arai, but otherwise you wouldn't. Zok to Gemara weiter. Rabba Amar Ein Kvel Shina. Rabbi says you're never ever allowed to sleep, even if it's a shinas arai, because every person has a different amount of sleep that satisfies him. So every sleep is considered a shinas kva. You're never allowed to sleep in your tefillin nor out of the sukkah. Rashi says, I'm not concerned that he might fall into deep sleep. Therefore, Therefore, by tefillin there's no problem with a shinas arai. So I made a mistake. There's no problem with a shinas arai by tefillin because there the whole problem is shema yafiach ben. But if you're not going to fall into a deep sleep, and we're not concerned that if you take a little nap, you'll fall into a deep sleep, then there's no problem for tefillin. But for sukkah, there's a problem even for a small nap. For sukkah, any time of the asr shinas arai, there's no such thing as a time that's called shinas kva. No one decides exactly how long you're going to sleep. Some people can dinner a little bit, and then they're strong, they're refreshed. So that little nap was a full shinas kva for that person at that time. But the kabit tefillin, the time is shema yafiach ben. But tefillin, the problem isn't ba'atzim sleep. The problem is that you might have a problem. The lav mishum mishrashin, it's not really because of the sleep itself. And therefore, benayim porta le'asil lefach. In a small nap, we're not worried that he'll let out some gas. Tani chada.
So there's no gas problem in the sukkah?
I guess not.
Is that teshuva came to duru? Is that why?
Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, it could be. Also, the sukkahs are much better ventilated. We learned that sukkah meduldalas. Why would someone want to make such a sukkah? It makes for better ventilation. We learned Hilni Amalka, her sukkah had the schach a little bit away from the walls, again, for ventilation purposes. You're allowed to sleep a shinas ari in your film, but you're not allowed to sleep a shinas kva in your film. We learned another brisa that says, bein kva bein ari. You're not allowed to sleep at all in your sukkah. And then we learned another brisa that says, loy kva v'loy ari. I'm sorry, bein kva bein ari means you're allowed to sleep sai shinas kva and sai shinas ari. Then we have a brisa you can't sleep at all. So there's one brisa says you can't sleep at all in your tefillin. The other brisa says dafka shinas kva you can't in your tefillin, and the other brisa says you're allowed to sleep in your tefillin. It all depends on where your tefillin was. If you're holding your tefillin in your hand, so Rashi, you're not even allowed to sleep a shinas arai because you're going to drop them. When you fall asleep, you'll drop whatever is in your hand. That brisa that says that you're not allowed to sleep a shinas kva, but you are allowed to sleep a shinas arai, is speaking when you're wearing the tefillin. And like we said earlier, that, like Rabbi said, that there is no problem of sleeping a shinas arai in your tefillin. There's no gzeres hafacha, and we're not worried that you'll fall into a deep sleep. And the brisa that says you're allowed to sleep even a shinas kva with your tefillin is had the parasudriluya, where you don't have it on you; it's on your bed beside you, wrapped in a baitel. And there, we're not concerned about that at all. And Rashi says the reason why it's allowed is the loynitna Torah lamalachei yesharis. You're going to have to sleep. So when you sleep, you take your tefillin off. You got to keep it near you to keep it safe. The kama shinas arai. Now we need to know how much is a shinas arai. How much sleep is a shinas arai? Tani Rami by Yecheskel. It's kedai hiluch meya am. It's the amount of time that it takes to walk 100 amos. I looked it up in the Bir Halacha, and he brings different shitas. He has one shita that it's about 50 minutes, and he has another shita that is about 50 seconds. So there seems to be a shaila in the Rishonim and Achronim how long this shinas arai is. But if it's only 50 seconds, it doesn't really do much for you if you could sleep a shinas arai in your it's like a red light. A shinas arai is asleep by a red light. But make sure to keep your foot on the brake. Tani nami hachi. Hayoshan b'tefillin. What if you're sleeping in your tefillin? V'roya keri. So the problem is, if you're roya keri, Rashi says, tzarech l'salkon me'roishay v'oida keri elav. You have to take it off right away while his body is still dirty with keri. So the halach is he shouldn't even touch the body of the tefillin. What he should do is he should be oiches b'ritzua. He should only grab the ritzua of the tefillin. Ve'eino oiches b'katzitza. But he should not grab the tefillin itself. So clearly you see here that you're allowed to sleep a shinas kva in your tefillin. Tosfos points out, so that Tosfos is havamina that it seems that you're allowed to sleep at shinas kva. The question is what you do if you see keri. But Tosfos will tell us that the chula moide b'shinas kva da aser. Really, the two shitas that we're about to quote, everybody would agree you cannot do a shinas kva. And the machlokes is during the day. Reb Nosson said that during the day you're allowed to sleep a shinas arai because during the day we're not afraid you'll slip into a shinas kva. But at night, there we don't even let you sleep a shinas arai because there you might slip into a shinas kva. And that's what the machlokes is if at night can you sleep a shinas arai and will you slip into a shinas kva? So the first time it says that if you yoshem with tefillin you right carry, you cannot take it off by grabbing the tefillin itself. You have to grab the ritzua. Tivei Yaakov. The Chachamim Oimrim yoshen adam with tefillin shinas arai avaloi shinas kva. So what Tosfos was pointing out as well is it seems like the Tanakama and Rabbi Yaakov are speaking about two different things. The Tanakama is talking about someone who slept in his tefillin and he was saw carry. And Rabbi Yaakov comments on that was Rabbi Yaakov, who's the Tanakama, and the Chachamim say you're allowed to sleep until shinas arai avaloi shinas kva. So what's going on? So that's what Tosfos want to say that the raya carry part of the brisa isn't the Machloikas. The Machloikas is what the Chachamim commented on. The Chachamim say that during the day, Yoshem Adam Teffilin Shinas Harai, and your back of held not. Evolution is kva. B'chami Shinas Harai, Kedehilach Mei Amo, a Shinas Harai is the amount of time it takes to walk 100 Amos. So once again, just to review, the Rabbi Yaakov's comments on someone who sees Kerry when he's wearing his tefillin, so he shouldn't grab the tefillin himself to take it off. He should grab it by the Ritzuas. And then there's a separate machlokes between Rabbi Yaakov and the Chachamim. If someone's allowed to sleep with tefillin, a shinas harai, by night, or if you're afraid that he'll slip into a shinas kva, if we allow that. Amarav, also the Adam lishain biyoim. This has nothing to do with sukkah. Rashi says biyoim mishum bittul Torah. A person shouldn't take long naps during the day. Also the Adam lishain biyoim yoyshem mishinas asus. You should not sleep more than the sleep of a horse. What is the sleep of a horse? The kama shinas asus shita nishmi. It's 60 breaths. And this is where the Bir Alocha comments that it's a shaila if it's 54 minutes or 54 seconds. Amar Abaye, Shansai Demar, Abaye told his Rabbi Yosef, your sleep, Rabbi Yosef, is Kederav, is like Rav sleep. Uderav, and Rav sleep is Kederebi. Uderabi and Rabbi sleep is Kededavid. Udedavid, Kesusya, David slept like a horse. And what does that mean? Udesusya, Shishim Nishmi. 60 breaths. Now there's a shayla how to understand this Gemara. We know David even at night only slept 60 breaths, and he slept like that on and off until Chatzos, and then he woke up. But these other Tanoim or Amiroyim, it's not clear in the Achronim how they're learning. Were these people like Rabbi Yosef and Rav and Rebbe, did they not sleep that amount even by night, or is this just referring to the Shina by day? And there's a little bit of a shayla about it. But for sure, David HaMelech, even by night, didn't sleep more than Shitin Nishmi. Dr. Mar Abaye have a kanayim, Kidema'ayel mipomdisa levekuvi. Abaye slept, how long did he sleep? He slept for the amount of time that it takes to go from Pomdisa to Bekuvi, which was a short period of time. And Rabbi Yosef, his rabbi, said, oh, look at that puffer. Kari alei Rabbi Yosef, ad mosai otel tishkav. How long could you lazy guy sleep? Mosai taka mishinoscha, when will you stand up from your sleep? So you see that they munned him there. They didn't want people sleeping too much. And Rabbi Yosef held that Abaye should be up. He shouldn't be sleeping so much. So there's a very interesting shaila, very, very interesting shaila about sleeping that are discussed. And that is as follows. They bring down from the Poskim, the Israeli Poskim, Rabbi Yashiv, the Dishmish brings down from, I think, Rabbi Yashiv, that it's also to go listen to a shir on Sukkot. You know, Chalamoid, the Shurim, or the Shurim, it's also to listen to a shir on Sukkot if you might fall asleep when the rabbi is speaking. Because you're not allowed to sleep, even that Shina Zarech for Sukkah. So because of that, the Poskim say that if you're afraid you might fall asleep in the shir, it's also to listen to a shir on Sukkah. Can you imagine? I tell the Rabbi the reason why I run out is because I'm afraid I'll be over. I don't want to sit there. The whole Mamish also. There's a shaila if you're allowed to go on the bus. They discuss: are you allowed to sit on the bus? Let's say you want to go to Tzfas for today, and you're going to fall asleep on the bus. There's actually a shaila there. Israeli Poskim will hold you're not allowed to sit on the bus. You're not allowed to sit in a car if you're going to fall asleep, because that's the problem of a Shin Zarech Chutz L'Sukkah. And then there are those who hold if it's on a bus, it's mamish arai. It's not even sleeping. It's not a normal sleep. It's not even a teshuv. It's not even a teshuv tekaduru, because when you would sleep in your house, you sleep properly in a bed. And even when you live in your house, you fall asleep in the car. You fall asleep by shir. And therefore, it's not a teshuv ketaduru problem. But there are poskim who hold that you're not allowed to go to a shir on Sukkot if you're afraid you'll fall asleep.
That doesn't absolve if someone wants to go to Simchas Beis Sheva and the shir is in the Sukkah.
I'm happy you brought that up. So he also went from the Israeli Poskim that Bochim sometimes travel from far and wide across Eretz Yisrael to come to a Simchas Beis Sheva that lasts half the night. And then they end up sleeping in sleeping bags, because there's no place, there's no accommodations, but it's like a big Simchas Beis Sheva, it's a big yeshiva or maybe Miron. And people go and they're there all night. They camp out. He says it's 100% usher. If you want to make a Besimcha B'Sheva and have people come from far and wide, you must have sleeping accommodations for everybody, because they're not allowed to party there and stay there a whole night and then just nap a little bit. So he actually addresses the traveling for Simchas Beis HaShevet as well. Tanar Ban, Hanichlas Lishan B'Yoyim. What if a person goes to sleep by day? And the question is, what should he do with his tefillin? So Ratza Chaylitz, he could either take off the tefillin if he wants, Ratza Manich, or if he wants, he can even leave them on. And Rashi says the reason why he could leave them on is if he should be yoim ain't dakir l'shamishamishtay. Sai, we don't have to worry about tashmish could happen, and sai v'lalishin kva. And sai, you won't fall into a deep sleep where there's a problem of a chash of afachah. Zoktamar balayla, but if you're going to sleep at night, chaylit, you have to take your tefillin off. And Rashi that feel l'shinas ayrai dilma mimlach l'yashin kva. Sometimes you just lie down for a nap, and then you're so tired you just stay there a whole night. I know that it happens a lot on my couch. So therefore, you're not even allowed to lie down on the couch after 9:30 p.m. You're not even allowed to take a nap on the couch, because sometimes that 5 minutes nap ends up being several hours. But Yosy Omer, Hayalodim, the young bacher, the young kids, they always have to take off their tefillin. No matter how short they sleep for, they're never allowed to wear tefillin. They have to take the tefillin off. Why? Because they're regilim betuma. And Rashi says, what does that mean? Because we're always afraid that bachrim are going to see keri. You know why? Because they're young and their hormones are running wild. And they have a lot of hair. And therefore, a bacher or someone youthful is never allowed. No, Rashi is bachrim. Bachrim are never allowed to sleep in their tefillin, because when it comes to bachrim, you never know what's going to happen. So are you saying that Yosy Yoda will carry camera tefillin? And Rashi says it's a shaila. It's a shaila. And if you're going to say that Rabbi Yosy holds that I'll carry camera tefillin, then we'd have to paskin like him, because Rashi says the kaimel nimuka imay. Rabbi Yosy was very trustworthy, and we would paskin like him. So tomorrow, no, that's not what I mean at all. We're talking about bi'aladim u'neshashem imayin. We're not talking about bacher. We're talking about young light. And why is there a problem? Bi'aladim u'neshashem imayin askin and shem yavoil the hergel dover. Someone who's old and over the hill, yeah, he can sleep in his keva, even his wife. We're not worried anything's going to happen. They're just going to fall asleep. But the young couples, when they're together, we're choshed things are going to happen, and that's going to come to Kalash Roish. We're afraid that if young light are wearing their tefillin when they go to sleep, they're going to engage in these extracurricular activities with their tefillin on. So therefore, we say you should take off your tefillin before you go to bed. This is mamish fascinating, that we're choshed that someone's, while he's wearing his tefillin, is going to engage in these activities. Tanar Abba, Shochach, what if you forgot v'shivas b'tosei b'tefillin? Could you imagine? Oh yeah, I didn't even realize that I was wearing tefillin and I had relations. It must be that they wore that tefillin all day long, so it was like part of them. Today it would, it's hard to fathom such a thing happening. So the halacha is, so you became a balkari. So what do? You're not even allowed to grab the ritzua, like we said earlier. You can't even grab the ritzua. Right away, you have to go wash your hands, and then you can take off the tefillin. If they shiyadai maskani is saying, we're afraid that with your hand you might have touched the keri itself, and it's not appropriate to even touch the ritzuas with that. Therefore, you have to wash your hands right away. Okay, let's get into the sugya of how much you're allowed to eat out of the sukkah. Maisa, so before we learn this Mishnah, let's just remind ourselves that on Amud Aleph we had a machlokes of what achila is, what's a kviyah suda, what's not. So we had two shittas. We had either the shitta that 3 kabetzim is still considered achila sarai, and more than 3 kabetzim is not. And Abaye said, how could it be? Sometimes people even eat a kabeya as a snack. So therefore, Abaye said that a kabetza is what's going to be the shear that you have to eat in the sukkah. Now let's see the Mishnah. They once brought a tafshel for Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Now, we also have to get clear, the last word that the Tana just said was Oichlin v'shoisin arai chutz l'sukkah. And right after that, to support that thought that you're allowed to eat achilas arei chutz l'sukkah, the Mishnah brings this story. They once brought some food to Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, or they brought Rabbi Gamliel shnei kaisavos, two kaisavos, udli shomayim, the amru, and they told them helam l'sukkah, take him to the sukkah, which is means even in achilas arei they wanted to eat in the sukkah, which is an interesting story. The Mishnah just said that you're allowed to eat achilas arei chutz l'sukkah, and then it brings a story where in fact they ate it in the sukkah, which the Gemara is going to comment about. When they offered this type of food to Rab Tzadok, you know what he did? He ate less than the kabetza, which said now he doesn't have to eat in the sukkah. Not lebamapa, he held it in a shmata, which means he didn't have to wash. And he ate it out of the sukkah. And he didn't bench as well because he ate less than the kabetza. So, Frank the Gemara, Maisa Listar. We just said a halacha in the Mishnah before that you can eat achilas arei chutz l'sukkah, and then to support that, the Gemara brings a story where they did exactly the opposite of that. And for the Gemara, there's something missing in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says you're allowed to eat achilas arei chutz l'sukkah, but in bal hachmer latzmai. But if you wanted to be machmer on yourself, machmer, you could be machmer, but less bei mishum yuhara. It's not an avod that it looks like you're showing off. You are allowed to be machmer and eat chutz l'sukkah and eat it in the sukkah, even though you're not mechuyev technically. So you see that they were machmer themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now the question is, so why did Rabbi Yitzchak eat it out of the sukkah? Why wasn't he machmer? But was he a lazy guy? Was he a kalav? Not. So we learned in Tosfos earlier, when we had this Gemara quoted earlier, that Rabbi Yitzchak B'davkin wanted to eat it out of the sukkah because he knew that you're not allowed to make a brichas leishev b'sukkah on this. And he's afraid that if he would go eat it in the sukkah, all his talmidim would see that you have to eat it in the sukkah, and then they would eat that small amount in the sukkah and make a brichas leishev. That's why he wanted to make a point, so he B'davka ate it out of the sukkah to demonstrate that even if you're going to eat it in the sukkah, don't make a leishev. So what did Reb Tzadok do? He ate less than a kabetza, not the b'mapa. He held it in a shmata, so he didn't have to wash. But and he ate it out of the sukkah, but he didn't bench. So what the problem is, if you're medayik from a tzaddik, the reason why he seemed to have he was makbid less than a kabetza. Why was he makbid less than a kabetza? Obviously, because if he would have eaten a kabetza, he felt that he would have had to eat in the sukkah. Hakabetza by sukkah. So even if tzaddik clearly says that you have to eat a kabetza in the sukkah, this is a kasha in Rabbi Yosef and Abaye, because we just said a minute ago on Chavav Amud Aleph that Rabbi Yosef said you can eat up to 2 or 3 beitzim out of the sukkah. That's not consistent with Rabbi Tzadok. And even Abaye said you can eat a kabetza chutz l'sukkah. You just can't eat more than the kabetza chutz l'sukkah. And here you see Rabbi Tzadok held a kabetza itself already triggers a chiyuv to eat in the sukkah. Zok the Gemara, the reason why Rabbi Tzadok was makbid to eat less than the kabetza had nothing to do with sukkah. He could have eaten more than the kabetza. Because according to Abaye, according to Rabbi Yosef, you can eat up to 2 or 3 kabetzim. According to Abaye, you could eat a kabetza. You didn't eat less than a kabetza. So why did Rabbi Yosef eat less than a kabetza? Maybe the reason why he was makbid on eating less than a kabetza, because if you eat a kabetza, you have to wash until shadayim. Could be there's only a chiyuv to wash until shadayim if you ate a shir kabetza. And the reason why he didn't eat a shir kabetza was only to avoid until shadayim. But it wasn't to avoid sitting in the sukkah, because in fact he could have eaten a lot more out of the sukkah. It's just that he would have had to make the til shadayim, and he wanted to avoid that problem. Okay, so let's stop here. I know it's a little early, but I have to give up the boardroom. So I want to wish everybody a wonderful, wonderful Canada Day. No, it's not Canada Day. It's Simco Day. Have a wonderful Simco Day. We should have a lot of bracha and atzlocha.
Dr. Zalman.
Yes.
You see from the Mishnah, not like you. Because when you said the story with Rabbi Eliashiv, with the psak of Rabbi Eliashiv, the order that you said was that a person is not allowed to go to shir, right?
Right.
And then after you said a person is not allowed to go to shir on Sukkot, right? Afterwards you said if he's going to fall asleep.
Right.
And there were a lot of people that heard Yosy Zalman say that you're not allowed to go to shir on Sukkot, and then
they fell asleep.
Yeah, the fact that they fell asleep, yes, they had already fallen asleep, but all they heard was that you're not allowed to go to a shear. So the reason why this is odd, right? Not because it's an odd order that what you said, that you have to be careful about your order, but because even the Mishnah shows us that we have to be careful about an order, because the Mishnah says "Oichel poches mikabetza." That's what Reb Tzadok did, right? Now, why would it use that word? Why would it go with that order? First, the order should be notle b'mapo, v'achle chutz b'sukkah, right? V'oichel poches mikabetza.
First it said the size, and only then did it say the kulas.
Right, because I might have fallen asleep.
Beautiful, beautiful, very, 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 very nice, beautiful. Shkoyach.